Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to the NOTCAST. This one's caught me a little bit by surprise now. That's not actually a surprise. It's that it started recording, and when I did something exciting with my hands, I never do anything exciting with my hands. If you've seen these before, you will know that I don't. This is number 354, I think. It's Tuesday, 16th of January, 2024. We're coming up to the 30th anniversary of a number of things that have happened. And I thought I'd better get a move on, really, so I can catch up with it at the right time. Today, I am going to be talking about a band that you have almost definitely heard of, and if you haven't, you've almost definitely seen the t-shirt, Nirvana, and their debut LP, Bleach, which was released in 1989, which doesn't seem like 35 years ago. It feels like it's about 7 years ago or something. But I know that as you get older, time has a different relationship to everything else. And one of the other things about it is, I had a relationship with Nirvana in so much as I, like a lot of people, liked them. So that you know the kind of the backstory, I'm old, or as I like to think of it, experienced. And I was a fan of Nirvana before Nevermind came out, which sounds very snobby, but it isn't. My best friend at school liked Nirvana. We would sit in his room listening to music and playing crappy video games. They weren't crappy, they were amazing for 1990 and 1991. We'd listen to like Mudhoney, Soundgarden, Nirvana, of course. I never got on with Tad. I didn't understand them, I really didn't. And he kind of gravitated towards things like the Smiths and the and bands like that. So obviously has cost me a lot of money over the years, having been his friend as a teenager, and to this day, actually, because very influential on my music taste. We'd listen to these albums, probably on tape, actually, recorded off his mate next door, who did have a job and worked at the car factory. So, pardon me. So that was probably one of the most expensive cassettes that there ever was, actually, is the one with Bleach on side one. To give you a bit of background about Nirvana and to kind of talk it through, really, you have to understand where the band came from. You have to understand who they were and what life was like at that point. Now, even me, a suburban, pretty gawky kid with not a huge amount of friends, who was trying to work out who I was at the age of 16 and 17, I felt like I didn't belong in this world. I felt like a square peg in a round hole, and I felt a little bit, to use the classic meaning of the word queer, somebody that felt like the society that they were operating within was one which they weren't really designed to work well in. That's how I felt. I think lots of people felt like that. I think Nirvana probably felt like that as well. And Nirvana come from a town called Aberdeen in Washington that's really quite small, 17,000 people. And if you've ever been to a town that's 17,000 people, and I'm thinking of places like Ramsbottom, Bramhall, Tony Pandy, places you probably haven't heard of unless you've been there or gone past there. You might have heard of Tony Pandy and Ramsbottom because they're unusual names for places. Those are places where, frankly, not very much happens, or as New Model Army sang in Green and Grey, where the world seems to happen somewhere else. The main kind of exports were angsty teenagers. The main jobs in the small city were dead-end jobs, basically. And I don't mean that in a prerogative, negative way. We've all got to earn money, right? I'm quite a fan of, sleeping in a bed and being able to buy food, for example. But jobs like cleaning hotels, cooking, service industry, waitressing, timber, working in fishing, tourism, infrastructure, the local 7-Eleven, those kind of jobs. It wasn't a hive of industry and technology, and yet neither was it a wretched hive of scum and villainy like Mos Eisley. It was just a pretty small town where not very much happened. The school probably wasn't very big. There were probably quite a few bands. Everybody knew everybody else. It would be a bit like the Waltons, I imagine. Walking down the street and going, "Hi, Jim Bob," and hi Kurt, and hi whoever around that. And it was one of those places where I think there was not necessarily a snobbery as such, but there was like, if you wanted to achieve something, like, you had to get out of the town. There was maybe one rock pub. There was maybe, the dating pool was relatively small. The bunch of friends was relatively small. You hung out with kids that wore black flag t-shirts at school because they were the only kids that have ever heard of Black Flag, for example, and it didn't matter whether you liked them or not, they had the same taste in music. And I, jokingly said, good people like good music. Not always true, but it is that kind of mentality of kind of thinking the world is very small, especially if you're surrounded by, mountains and motorways. And if you wanted to go anywhere else or see anything else, you had to travel a heck of a long way to get there. I think there was one of the reasons why I think Nirvana were huge was they had that kind of sense of ambition around, we want our talents and our skills to take us as far as they can. And as I said, when I was about 16, 17, the idea was I had to get out of where I was in order to be able to fulfill my potential. I didn't really want to become a local photocopier salesman. No disrespect to photocopy salesmen. I didn't really want to go and work in the HP sauce factory where the chimney was shaped like a HP sauce bottle. I didn't want to work at Cadbury's or the car factory or go on the dole. So like, what other options would I have? It's the same kind of idea of being written out of history as, you only come from, Aberdeen, where nothing ever happens and no one's ever come from. It's a dead end in some respects, and you feel like you're being told to stay in your lane. And as Kurt Cobain said, as soon as you leave Aberdeen, the houses get nicer, which kind of tells you about what the place is like. Economically depressed, a town that was pretty kind of hands-off, I think, fairly rural, and fairly traditional. And that was the environment that Nirvana were born in, although, of course, they were first known as Fecal Matter in 1985 with, I think, Dale Crover, who I think played drums in the Melvins, could be wrong, and a guy called Greg Hawkinson, who's a name I've never pronounced. Dale played guitar, but also drums, and apparently Dale and Kurt's friendship changed Kurt's life completely. So, and especially this is kind of mentioned on the song Mr. Moustache, which is on the Bleach album here, which is that it's the idea of challenging, the idea and exception. You think about what was popular in 1987. The biggest selling albums were probably Michael Jackson's Bad, Def Leppard's Hysteria, The Joshua Tree, and Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And you think about the contemporaries that were making loud guitar music, and you think about basically wankers like Motley Crue, where it was basically just pop with guitars. And the lyrics were, I gotta be blunt, I hated the lyrics to those type of things. Songs like Girls, 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 Dr. Feelgood, songs about strippers and spandex and driving cars. And as the Smiths said, of course, it says nothing to me about my life, and I doubt it said anything to Kurt or anybody in Nirvana about their life. Is you kind of sit there and go, so what's the appeal of writing a song about, monsters and motorcycles? You don't have much experience of either. Whereas Nirvana seemed to me to be very heavily influenced by basically all the bands with the word black in the title. So Black Flag, Big Black, Black Sabbath, not Black Lace, but lots of other bands, and it just seemed to be this kind of thing where you go, well, there's another path to take here, and you don't have to wear yellow and look like a wasp that's been forced to play a guitar or anything like that. You could actually just look like a person and play rock music. And of course, Nirvana was rock music. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of like the melodicism of ABBA alongside the sound of Black Sabbath. Sticking those two together and you come up with something that's like Bleach, or later on, of course, Nevermind. These are not like, amazing revelations, really. But when you come from a town like that, that's pretty small, everybody knows everybody else, the suicide rate is most definitely higher than average. You kind of go, well, the only way out really is music, and music is the only thing that makes sense. And when I was 16 or 17, and I would listen to Bleach at my friend's house, we'd just kind of just sit there and go, this is so much better than Simply Red. Why the hell are people listening to Simply Red? What do people see in that stuff? When you could listen to School and have Kurt singing about No Recess, which with all the gravitas of the end of the world as we know it is, well, I don't even get 15 minutes playtime. It's things that I connected to that felt real and true to me, as opposed to Iron Maiden, who I love Iron Maiden, but they are a bit silly, aren't they? Really, and I'll be talking about Iron Maiden coming up shortly in the next few weeks, I think. And then I'll go through every single one of their albums and get increasingly disparaging as their albums get worse and worse. Then get better, then get worse. So starting off, Fecal Matter formed, and they did a demo tape, and you know, it wasn't particularly good. And Kurt would spend lots of time working on his art, whatever his art was, you know, creating stuff that was rooted in, you know, biology and masculinity and identity, and then start to create something that represented that. The band's early years are pretty well documented. The first and probably highly bootlegged recording really is the Chaos FM live show from Chaos FM on April the 17th, 1987. For some reason, this £1 CD that I bought from Poundland featured that session of 9 tracks, plus some songs recorded for Saturday Night Live. And of course, features a drummer on there that doesn't play on this, and absolutely no hits. But it is something which I don't think has really been given a proper release. The early years recordings are scattered all over the place in lots of different configurations. And really, they could benefit from being on one compilation release. The band's early years are also well chronicled on this box set, With the Lights Out, which features as its CD number 1, effectively the bonus disc to Bleach that never was, and CD1 on With the Lights Out, which is, by the way, With the Lights Out is an absolutely essential bit of box set history. Features a number of radio performances, studio performances, rehearsals, demos, a number of unreleased tracks, some live offcuts, bits and bobs. They're all on here, and they're all streaming, of course, as well as the first video footage of a 1988 rehearsal in Chris's mother's house. I mean, effectively, if you want to get, you know, the Nirvana albums in expanded forms, you also have to get With the Lights Out, which features 3 audio discs and a CD, each one of which will effectively represent a period of the band's history, and the DVD will be a compilation of a whole bunch of stuff. This is an absolutely essential purchase, but you probably knew that anyway. There is also a compilation called Sliver, the Best of the Box, that has 3 extra tracks. I won't go through those. But the band's early years, they recorded a lot, and not all of it, it's fair to say, was particularly amazing. Don't judge me for saying that, girl, you know it's true. So we have also the first demo tape that was recorded at Reciprocal Recording on the Outcesticide CD. This is an essential part, pardon me, of early Nirvana archaeology and understanding the band and where they're coming from, featuring, I think, 7 songs recorded in January 1988. According to this, 23rd of January 1988, which means Nirvana's recording career started effectively 36 years ago, which is quite a surprise, really. It doesn't seem 36 years ago. It really doesn't. But then history and time is a bit of a weird thing, really, especially when you've got recordings which bring back almost everything. There are a couple of live DVDs that I've watched, and I'm like, that's exactly why it felt when I was there. And then all of a sudden, without realising, you're accessing your own memories about the particular moment that have been, you know, covered in the fog of time and work and cats and food and everything that goes with it. And suddenly you're right back there in the room, and it feels as real as it ever did. I'm trying to think about which ones really capture that. I think the New Order at Reading DVD from 1998 absolutely captures the sense and the feeling that I had on that particular day watching that particular set. Now I feel like I want to watch it again, and I probably shouldn't, actually, because then I'll just feel very old indeed. If you're also interested in early material from the band, official release, go for the Montage of Hex soundtrack CD, which is Kurt's home demos and futzing about on a tape recorder. And it's an interesting curio, but clearly was never ever meant to be released. It's just a bunch of stuff recorded by Kurt on his home tape recorder, demos and rough tracks and, you know, work in progress. Proof of concept, I think, is the management speak way of describing it. Absolutely fascinating listening, but not necessarily really representative of what the band could or should be, or what they were to become. So the Chaos FM session, as on Classic Airwaves, is the first thing that you really should be tracking down if you're interested in Nirvana archaeology. That's the first one. Then get for Outcesticide, that has the Reciprocal Recording Studios session from the 23rd of January 1988. If you can't get it there, by the way, you could also look for, and this one's more difficult to get, the Grunge is Dead CD. As you've probably worked out, Nirvana were very heavily bootlegged. because the band were really bloody successful at the time. And so this features, for example, the debut single, Love Buzz, the original single version, a version of Spank Through, the recordings from the Bleach sessions at, well, let's think, not actually reciprocal. So the Outcest decided it's the January sessions. Grunge is Dead features the Bleach sessions from December 1988, the unreleased tracks, and that features Hairspray, Queen, Downer, Sifting, and Blue, with different lyrics apparently, but I've not delved deeply into that. On the grounds that a lot of those songs are on the Incesticide compilation. The first single, Love Buzz, was recorded on the 30th of June 1988, released in November 1988 on a US 7-inch, and limited to a few hundred copies, very heavily bootlegged. I don't have a copy of that. I think I looked on Discogs, went, I wonder how much copy of that would be, see if there was maybe an unofficial 7-inch of it. About £4,000. So unsurprisingly, I decided to pay the mortgage and eat food instead. The second release that we had about the same time, not long after, was a track called Spank Through, which was on the Sub Pop 200 compilation release. And then on the period in December 1988 and January 1989, the band started recording the album that was going to become Bleach. Here is an original Sub Pop Tupelo Records edition from, I think, 1991 or thereabouts. They couldn't print enough copies of this, in the same way that they couldn't print enough copies of Nevermind when it was released. This album sold just 40,000 copies until November 1991. It's now sold 1.9 million copies by September 2016. So, the sales post fame have massively eclipsed the sales that we were going to have before. And you've got to remember, at the time, 40,000 copies was bugger all. It might be enough to get you to number one in the charts these days, but in those days, 40,000 copies was half of what Pop Will Eat Itself sold for The Looks or The Lifestyle. It was less than a tenth of what EMF had sold for Schubert Dip, less than a 20th of what Ned's Atomic Dustbin sold for Godfather in the US. So these are big numbers, and this was not a big band. The Sub Pop didn't have enough money to press copies when it was delivered to them. So even though it was ready in January, it wasn't released until June 1989. And it was a difficult birth. I think, for me at least, this album has aged very, very well. It's probably the best album that Nirvana could have made at the time. You could have seen the roots of what they were going to become, so that kind of direct melodicism, that heavy Black Sabbath-esque sound, especially on the drums, with Chad Channing or Dale Crover on drums, and this kind of relentless sound, which sounded like somebody making music out of desperation, out of trying to just climb themselves out of wherever they'd been put. And if you've ever been in a band and you wanted to be successful, even more successful than Odin in The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, you would very definitely have this sense of that you are clawing yourself out, inch by inch, fingernail by fingernail, out of the world in which you were forced to exist, a world where you felt like you didn't necessarily belong. So there was, backs to the wall, this huge sense of escape, trying to define who you are through your actions, assigning agency to yourself, even if it's possibly self-destructive, is to just kind of climb out of the world that you were living in, that you were forced to exist in, where you kind of go, this is not my world, this is not the world that I would have chosen, this is not the life that I would have had I had the choice about it. And that sense of urgency comes through Bleach. And you can kind of think about it from a slightly cynical perspective and go, sure, if you haven't got very much money, you're in a rehearsal room that's opposite a Metallica covers band, you're going to have to be loud just to hear what you're making, right? But sometimes you kind of think, well, actually, there's a beauty in that noise. There's a poetry in that noise, an articulacy in the inarticulate howl of despair and rage at the situation which you're put in. And I mean, certainly I felt that quite keenly when I was 16 or 17. Kurt was 6 years older than me, and probably felt exactly the same thing. So if you'd have taken forward to 1995, and I'd have been like, well, I grew up in a town of, 17,000 people, of course I would have wanted to have got myself out of that situation. And I got myself out of the situation I was in that was imposed upon me through a different set of actions. But at the same point, you kind of feel you want to escape from the world which has been forced upon you. Kurt was a product of divorced parents, where at a very early age, at the age of I think 9, the foundations of his life shook and cracked. He lived with his mum, but he moved to his dad in 1979 and then moved back to his mum's in 1982. So he hasn't had that sense of stability or that home environment. Everyone's home environment when they're growing up is a little weird. There is no such thing as normal, but at the same point you kind of go, well, this is the normality I live in, the world I have to exist in, whether I like it or not. I now look as an adult looking at the life that I had as a child, and some of the behaviours, the things, and some of the things that I observed, and some of the attitudes that I saw, and I kind of go, that wasn't healthy. But at the same point, at the time, I was just in the midst of it, and you're living minute to minute throughout all of these things and coping with the world that has been bowled to you, and then you just have to kind of, it's how you play the bat that matters. Sorry, I've gone full Alan Partridge there. Forgive me. But needless to say, I had the last laugh. Bleach was recorded between December the 24th and January the 24th, 1989, for a sum total of £606. $606.17. They recorded with both Chad Channing on drums, and they then also remixed a number of songs, so Floyd the Barber, Paper Cuts and Downer, which had Dale Crover on drums, which were recorded in January 1988. The recording was pretty quick and pretty dirty. I mean, as I've said, it was maybe 6 days, 30 hours in total. Mostly it was recorded in 5 hours with vocals then re-recorded separately. The whole thing was mixed and done in 5 days, effectively. And although, as you can see, Nirvana are a 4-piece on the cover. Jason Everman there, who is now, I think, a security and military consultant, who then also went on to play in Soundgarden, and then went in to be in War Zones. Jason doesn't play on the LP. In fact, I think if you look at the booklet to the reissue, which I'll get to shortly, I don't think he's even credited on that, and he's taken out of some of the photographs, apart from obviously the front cover photograph. And it's a very clear kind of cover that displays to you exactly what it is. No nonsense, mucking about, not enough money for a colour sleeve, and put the whole thing into a negative so that it looks a bit weird, and can kind of get this, encapsulate this image of no mucking about. This is guys with guitars. You know what this record is going to sound like when you look at it, in the way that you know exactly how awful Poison's Open Up and Say Are is going to be just by looking at the absolutely atrocious cover, or Wasps, Animal Fuck Like a Beast. You know that's not going to be good when you look at the cover, and you kind of sit there and go, that's the artistic statement you want to make? A woman getting sexually molested by a dog? And somebody sat there and went, that's okay? Whereas Nirvana are like, this is us, this is who we are. And these are songs about real things. These aren't songs, and I mean, as I've said before, I'm a big lyrics guy. This is an album about something that matters. It's not about monsters or mammary glands or anything like that. This is about the world people live in. Mr. Moustache, for example, is an absolutely enormously important song in Nirvana's discography, because it identifies and talks about the construct of masculinity, the idea of an identity, the idea of going, well, you have to be physical, you can't be emotional, you can't show feelings, you can't show weakness, you have to affect. And Mr. Moustache being, the idea is that if you have a moustache, that's quite manly. Burt Reynolds had a moustache, and for many people, he was the ideal man, including my dad, who probably looked at that moustache and went, nice tash, I'll have it. I think my dad's still got a tash. I have no idea. I don't understand moustaches. I really don't. It's like, it's the easiest part of the face to shave, so why is that the one bit that you don't do? And you kind of just, nah. I think the last time I saw a non-ironic Non-Hipster Moustache was 1997, I think. Just awful things. And if you've got a moustache, consider other options before you stick with it. It really is. Bleach is an album that I really, really rate. It's got some really interesting ideas in it. Obviously, it's got About a Girl, which is one of the best songs that Nirvana ever did. It opens with Blue, their first UK single, and it has it had a working title of Too Many Humans. And the reason it had a working title of Too Many Humans was kind of like saying, I've met a lot of humanity. I'm a bit fed up of it. It doesn't work for me. Which, oddly enough, is how I feel every time I leave the house, really, is I see other human beings and go, not got much in common with most of you. And that's okay, because they probably look at me and don't even think anything. Well, it's just a fucking dude, isn't it? Just walking down the street. I'm sat there going, not my kind of people. The other thing is that taking the working title of Too Many Humans was revised to Bleach, and the reason it took the name Bleach was there was a 1980s public service announcement to drug users which said, bleach your works before you get started, therefore preventing cross-contamination of viruses, infections, AIDS, all that type of stuff. The idea of having to clean yourself or clean your works, clean your environments so that it's pure. Really interesting idea. But you just look at it and go, well, bleach is kind of like it's an industrial detergent, isn't it? And the idea of, well, that's quite gritty, that's very realistic. It's better than calling the album, The Adventures of Vlad the Impaler, or whatever the hell nonsense, Celtic Frost were up to. And it was also not just influenced by bands like Black Sabbath, but there was a tape that was played endlessly in the band's tour bus. One side was the Smithereens, the other side was Celtic Frost. And when you think about the sound of Celtic Frost spot welded to the melodic strength of the Smithereens, not that I'm a huge fan of the Smithereens, you can kind of see where this album was coming from, and it was an interesting place. This version of the album, the CD on Tupelo, has the UK CD edition. So, as I said, the album wasn't released until June 1989, and it wasn't released in the UK until a little bit later. And that's because they didn't have enough money at the label. The other thing around the album, and this is a kind of like an interesting thing, is the UK version replaced the track Big Cheese with Love Buzz on the CD, and then Big Cheese became a bonus track at the bottom on later editions. So look, because Love Buzz hadn't been released in the UK, and the band were playing it live, even though it was their first single. So that's an interesting thing. And this is the definitive edition of Bleach that you had before remastering, which was available for something like 20 years. So fairly big in the big scheme of things. The album was released on Mushroom Records, I think, on Waterfront Records, actually, on white vinyl. This is not it. Despite what you are about to see, this is not the Waterfront Records white vinyl version. This is an unofficial version of it that I saw for £10. I kind of looked at it and went, well, I could pay £33 for it and make sure Nirvana get the money, or I can pay £10, keep the £23 myself, and have a copy of Bleach on vinyl. I decided to do that. I don't recommend it because it's bad, of course, and if you have loads of money, but I was driven by the fact that, well, I could do that, or I could pay an extra £23 and make sure the money goes to a big faceless mega corporation. And I decided against that on the grounds that I'm a small, very faced mini corporation, i.e. myself, and I wanted to make sure that, well, frankly, I just got tempted and went, yeah, fine, I'll do that. Dead people don't need money. Although I am going to say, of course, you should buy records. They are fantastic, and they're portable, mass-produced works of art. In the UK, and bearing in mind that I was buying everything on a budget at the time, I was very limited by what I could afford. I was on pocket money. So I was like, right, I'll only buy what I can afford. And the answer was not very much. So I did buy the first UK single, Blue, on CD. It's limited to 3,000 copies across the CD and the 12-inch. CDs were new and fancy and sexy and amazing. And so that's why I bought the CD, because vinyl's for old folks and prog rock fans. CDs are new and they're going to last forever. And of course, that's the approach that I took. The single of Blue has a number of previously unreleased songs on it. So it's got the LP version of Blue on there. It's got a studio recording of, and let me just quickly check, it's got Love Buzz on there. It's got Being a Sun, which was kind of its first release on there, and then it also had Stain, songs that you will know from the Incesticide record from 1992. So Stain is on there, and Being a Sun as well. Being a Sun in a radio format, as well as the outtakes from Bleach. So Mexican Seafood, Hairspray Queen, Aero Zeppelin, Big Long Now, and Beeswax were all kind of recycled from the Bleach sessions. So quite a lot of material was recorded in one go. The band had a lot of songs, not all of them were great, but they were all kind of sent off out to compilation albums and obscure releases in exchange for like $300 to keep the band going. Blue got to number 15 in the UK indie charts. It was first recorded during the Love Buzz sessions, and for that version was unreleased, and then it was detuned down to drop C from D standard, and that version is the version of Blue which we know and most of us love. It's a great song, actually, really love it. Ended a number of Nirvana live shows, very powerful live apparently. I didn't see Nirvana live, which I'll talk about later on. I could have seen them loads. I think they played Goldwyn's, which was a 23-minute bus ride from my house, but I didn't have the £6.50 to have it. Go to see Depeche Mode at the NEC, which cost me £12.50, practically bankrupted me for a month. So going to see Nirvana, who I quite liked, for £6.50, I'll get to see them again. They'll keep touring. Update, they didn't tour very often after that. The album was released in June 1989, as I've said, in America in October to December 1989. It was released in Europe, and the release was scheduled to coincide with the band's first UK and European tour, supporting TAD. And some of those recordings from the London Astoria were released from the Muddy Banks of the Whisker live album in 1996. We also had a BBC session in October 1989 for John Peel, I think, which they played Love Buzz, About a Girl, Polly and Spank Through. So that's 3 songs which weren't on the album, so really promoting the album there. And then they started adding new songs into their set. So starting in January 1990, songs like Sappy, Lithium, In Bloom, as was known, Pay to Play, Dive, Polly, Here She Comes Now. There is a number of other releases from around about the same period, some official, some unofficial, lots of unofficial releases. I'm going to pick out just this one, which was I picked up quite affordably relatively recently, which is from Seattle on the 28th of December 1988. This is an audience recording, despite it telling you that it's an FM broadcast, of a pre-Bleach live show. It's quite good because Nirvana live were damn good. But it isn't a great recording. It's an audio recording or an audience recording on a cassette that's been put onto LP. So that was about £8 actually, which I thought was quite reasonable, all things considered. 1990 saw the release of, well, the band recorded a lot of material in 1990. They recorded a bunch of demos, which later appeared on their next album, and that includes an On Grunge Is Dead, so versions of Dive, Lithium, Sappy, Polly, In Bloom, Breed and Pay to Play, which are on the Grunge Is Dead bootleg, by the way, but also now on the Nevermind expanded version. They also recorded another couple of songs at the same session. Those 2 songs became this single, the 1990 7-inch of Sliver. This is a lovely shade of blue vinyl from the early 90s. I forget when I picked this up. Might have been around about the time Nevermind came out, actually. On a blue splatter there. I mean, I'm a sucker for coloured vinyl, but there is a limit to what I can put up with. And if I kind of put this, oh, that looks nice. I'll take a photograph of that later. It was Sliver is just a wonderful song. I love it to bits. The first time I heard it, the idea about the chorus going, Grandma take me home, and just repeating that endlessly to the point where it kind of becomes almost numb through repetition, and then it reaches another level of fluency by being repeated a number of times, as if suddenly by the time you get to the 5th time that you say Candyman into the mirror, you suddenly reach a new level of understanding around what it is. In 2009, there was a deluxe edition of Bleach. This is very, very small and minimal in terms of content compared to other Nirvana deluxe editions. But if you only own one version of Bleach, this is the one to go for. It features the now standardized international track listing for the album, which doesn't have Love Buzz on it, I think. Oh, it does. And it also has a live set recorded at the Pine Street Theatre in Portland, Oregon. The live B-sides that were included on the Sliver 12-inch and CD single, here is the UK version of it on Tupelo Records, are including About a Girl and Spank Through live, were taken from this show, I believe. So if you've got this, you don't need that, which is handy. And this features a full live set from 1990 on the remaining part of the CD inside a trifold package. So there's Kurt, Chad, Chris, or Chris, depending on how you want to look at it. There's let me just open this up. I probably should have done this beforehand. There's a booklet here that has some photographs. So there's the original unnegatived version of the cover. Let's see what else there is in there. There's, you can get to see like well, let's have a look at that. So I don't think there's any photographs of Jason apart from on the cover in this version of the album, and like a reference to him. Jason wasn't in the band for very long. That's the original cover art to Love Buzz, by the way. Chad there, and Chad on drums. Chad was a really good drummer, by the way. He's not as fluent or as fluid or as he doesn't have quite as wide a skill set as Dave Grohl, but really good drummer for the time. And I think, he was pushing the band very fluently. And if he'd been the only drummer that Nirvana had ever had, nobody would have had any complaints about him. They would have said, well, he's quite good, isn't he? But obviously Dave Grohl being one of the best drummers in the world means that no matter who plays drums compared to him, none of them sound as good. Because I think if I had to rank my favourite drummers in the world, in fact, I'm going to do it now. My favourite drummers in the world would include Dave Grohl. They'd include Earl Harvin, Stephen Perkins, the now departed Martin Jolks from the Wonder Stuff. He's an incredible drummer, and none of your standards, I'm afraid to say. Neil Peart was pretty good, but his music didn't always hit me. Actually, I think Charlie Watts was a great drummer. He wasn't great, but he was great for the Stones and did an amazing job of it. Underrated, I think it's fair to say. But as Charlie Watts once said, don't you dare call me your drummer, you're my fucking singer, which is the right way to look at it. And again, so far, I don't think we've got a picture of Jason apart from that one shot in the whole of the sleeve, and I think he's just given a thanks credit on there, I believe. So the booklet photo credits are pretty clear around what's going on in there. We have just special thanks to Jason Everman because he paid for the sessions, and then you've got the CD that sits in there as well. So Bleach is a very solid debut album. There's not much in the way of a hint around, well, what are the band going to do next? Where are they going to go? How good are they going to be? All that is going to come. And because I was paying far more attention in 1991 than I was in 1989, 1991 is probably going to be a much longer episode and possibly less boring. I think around about this time, a lot of bands, they do one album and sometimes that's the only record they're going to make. And you kind of go, are you ever going to do anything else? So you kind of put all your best stuff forward. But the songwriting took a massive leap in 1989. And yes, whilst you had verses, choruses, conclusions, and so on, suddenly something unlocked in the songwriting abilities, the ability to change tempos, the ability to move up keys, the ability to access new areas of the sound, which perhaps they hadn't previously got. And sometimes, like every band, you have a certain number of songs that you start off with, then you get to a certain point, and all of a sudden there's a great leap in songwriting. The Cure had it with the second album, 17 Seconds. The Manics had it with Holy Bible. There's suddenly a bit where suddenly you kind of go, you're not just writing songs, you're writing great songs. And that was just around the corner for Nirvana. And you could hear it in those songs that were being played. So I didn't hear the songs from Nevermind until they were released. I heard them and suddenly it's like, I listened to it and I thought, this band are going to be huge. I could just tell just by listening to it. that were going to be huge. And if they weren't going to be huge, they were going to be a band that were going to be super, super influential for the rest of time in a kind of Velvet Underground fashion, in so much as maybe they didn't sell that many records, but every record they sold helped form a band. And then that way you can change the world even without headlining stadiums. All that is to come in the story of Nirvana. I am, you know, really pleased that I liked this band at the time, even though I didn't get to see them live. I got to experience them through the papers and the press and hearing my friends. And, you know, I went to uni and they were due to play my uni. I mean, I had tickets and they cancelled when Kurt lost his voice. So instead I just heard about, you know, my mates that went to see them in Birmingham because they hadn't gone to uni. And they're like, oh, incredible, we must go next time. And if you were paying attention, you'll know that there wasn't really a next time in terms of a UK tour after that. But that is, as Max Katana says, a tale for another time. So thank you for watching me talking about Bleach. Hope you like it. If you don't, that's okay. The world is full of other YouTubers. And if you do, that's brilliant. So thank you and stay beautiful. All right, I'm going. Bye.